It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. My name's Hunter. I'm 34, divorced, dad to 2 boys. Caleb, who just turned 9, and Max, who's 7 and way too smart for his age. We live in a small rental house just outside the city. Nothing fancy, but it's warm, it's ours, and more importantly, it's quiet. After everything that went down over the last few years with my family, quiet was the one thing I clung to like a lifeline. So when my mom's name popped up on my phone 2 days before New Year's Eve, I almost let it ring. We hadn't exactly been close lately, and by lately, I mean since around the time my ex-wife left and my family made it very clear which one of us they thought was to blame. Spoiler, not her. My mom has always been the kind of person who picks a golden child and builds the world around them. In our family, that child is, and has always been, my younger brother, Ryan. Ryan the achiever. Ryan the golden boy. Ryan with the perfect marriage and the job in finance, and the kids who wear matching sweaters and Christmas cards. Meanwhile, I'm the at least he tries son. I work in IT, freelance mostly, which to them sounds like unemployed but pretending. I'm also the one who doesn't show up for every single barbecue, the one who isolates himself, the one who never really fits in with the rest of us. But that's fine. I stopped trying to fit in a long time ago. So yeah, I was shocked when my mom called. And even more shocked when her voice came through, light and cheerful, like we hadn't spoken through gritted teeth the last time we talked in August. Hunter, sweetheart, hey, she said. Listen, we're doing a big family New Year's thing at the house. A countdown and everything. Bring the boys. It'll be special. I said nothing for a second. Just listened to the forced sparkle in her tone and waited for the catch. There's always a catch. I mean, the kids would love it, right? She added quickly. We've got sparklers, snacks, even a photo booth thing set up. We just thought, it's time. It would mean a lot to your brother. And to Dad. Right. Not to her. Or to me. But to Ryan. I should have said no. I should have made up some excuse. Plans with friends, a trip, anything. But Max was listening in from the kitchen and whispered, Are we going to go to Grandma's? With cookies. And I just gave in. Okay, I said, slow and cautious. We'll come. Wonderful, she chirped, and just like that, the call ended. No, can I bring anything? No, how are the boys? Just a task checked off her list. The next day, I let the kids pick out what they wanted to wear. Max wanted to wear a superhero cape. Caleb settled on a flannel and clip-on tie, because it's fancy, but not try-hard. We baked cookies, actual from-scratch ones, not just slice and bakes. Chocolate chip and snickerdoodles. The boys got flour all over the counter, and I didn't even care. They were excited. They hadn't seen their cousins in a while. They were staying up late for the first time to watch the ball drop. And for the first time in months, I saw that giddy glow in their eyes. I'll admit it, I got hopeful. The night of the 31st, we showed up just after 8 p.m. The house was glowing with string lights. I could hear music inside, laughter, and the soft pop of what sounded like champagne bottles. I carried the cookie tray in one hand and held Max's hand with the other. Caleb bounced behind us, chattering about how many cookies we should eat versus give away. I rang the bell and waited and waited. Finally, after about 2 minutes, the door opened. It was my cousin, Erin. She looked surprised, like we were early to a party that had already started. Oh, she said. Hey, Hunter. You made it. Yeah, I said, smiling despite myself. We brought cookies. Oh, she repeated, glancing at the tray like it was a science experiment. Cool. Come in, I guess. The moment we stepped inside, I knew something was off. The house was packed, like wall-to-wall with people. Decorations everywhere, food tables already picked over, music bumping louder than I expected. But what really hit me was this. Everyone was already celebrating. Toasting, dancing, counting down early for the kids. There were empty glasses on every surface, wrapping paper from gifts on the floor, and the unmistakable vibe of a party that had been in full swing for hours. And not a single person turned to welcome us. No one said, Hey, glad you made it, or the boys are here. Not even my mom. I scanned the living room. Ryan was standing near the fireplace, drink in hand, laughing with his wife and a group of their friends. Their kids were already in pajamas, curled up on the couch with plates of cookies and cider. My parents were in the kitchen, mid-toast with a few aunts and uncles, all smiling like this was the best night of the year. I walked in a little further. There were no empty chairs, not even a spot at the kids' table. And the snack table? Bare. Not a single cookie left. I turned to Erin. Where should we put the cookies? She blinked. Oh, I think they already did dessert. You can just, I don't know, set them down somewhere. Did dessert? I asked. The invite said 8, right? Erin looked uncomfortable. Yeah, but people came early. Right. People. Not us. I walked the boys into the living room. Caleb immediately noticed the empty couch and said, Where do we sit? Max clutched the tray tighter and whispered, Where's Grandma? Ryan looked up, saw us, and gave a polite nod. Not a smile. Not a hey bro. Just a nod, like we were guests who wandered into the wrong Airbnb. My mom finally came over a minute later. She looked frazzled, drink in hand, cheeks flushed. Oh, you're here, she said, like we'd arrived uninvited. You said 8, I said carefully. Well, yes, but people came earlier, and we just started, she trailed off, eyes scanning the boys' outfits, then the cookie tray. Oh, cookies. That's sweet. She didn't even look at the boys. Not really. No hug. No, I missed you. No, come sit. Let me get you guys something. Nothing. And that's when I realized this wasn't for us. It never was. We weren't invited to join the celebration. We were invited to check a box, to say they tried, to give them a reason to feel like they'd done their part. So when they told stories about family and togetherness, they could say, well, Hunter came. But we weren't meant to be part of it. And my sons? They were just background noise. Forgotten. I looked down at them. Caleb was quiet, holding his tie like he suddenly regretted wearing it. Max was staring at the tray of cookies, still full, still untouched. The excitement they'd carried with them, the joy, the wonder, was draining out of their faces in real time. I made a decision. I turned to my mom. We'll head out, I said. She blinked. What? But you just got here. There's nowhere to sit. The kids are hungry. And it looks like the countdown already happened. It was just for the little kids, she said. We were going to do another one at midnight. It's okay, I said. Calm. Steady. We'll just go. I picked up the cookie tray, gently guided the boys toward the door, and walked out without looking back. We got in the car. I didn't say anything for a minute. I just started driving. Max broke the silence. Did we do something wrong? My throat tightened. No, buddy. Not at all. Caleb was quiet for a second. They didn't even say hi. Nope, I said softly. They didn't. We went home. I let them stay up anyway. We watched the ball drop from our couch, just the 3 of us. Ate the cookies ourselves. I even let them pop some indoor party poppers I bought last minute from the dollar store. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. And then the next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from my grandpa. His voice was shaking, and what he said changed everything. When I say I stared at my phone for 5 full minutes before pressing play on that voicemail, I'm not exaggerating. It came in just after 6 a.m., which was odd in itself. My grandfather wasn't usually up that early, and definitely not calling people. Especially not me. He's the kind of man who still writes checks by hand and mails Christmas cards with actual stamps. The idea of leaving a voicemail, let alone at dawn, felt deliberate. I played it. At first, there was just silence. Some rustling. A breath. Then his voice, low and a little hoarse. Hunter, it's Grandpa. I know it's early. I didn't want to wake the boys, but I had to say this before I lost my nerve. I sat up straighter in bed, pulse rising. I saw what happened last night. I saw everything. There was a pause, like he was collecting himself. I heard a soft clink, maybe his glasses or a mug hitting the table. You walked in smiling, and nobody said a word. Your boys looked so proud, and then so confused. I watched you walk out without making a fuss, and your mother just shrugged like it didn't matter. Like you didn't matter. Another pause. And I should have said something then. I didn't. I froze. I watched it all, and I said nothing, because that's what we do in this family, right? We keep quiet. We don't stir the pot. But that's how this poison spreads. I see it now. He inhaled shakily. You're a good man, Hunter. You're a better father than I ever was. Better than your dad ever tried to be. Don't let them make you feel small. I'm sorry I haven't said it sooner. Then the voicemail ended. I must have replayed it a dozen times. It didn't erase what happened, but it cracked something open. Not just the hurt, which I'd learned to live with, but the anger. The steady, coiled-up anger I'd been pushing down for years, pretending it didn't matter. Pretending I was over it. But I wasn't. Not even close. Not after what happened next. That same morning, Just after breakfast, my mom texted me. No greeting. No apology. Just, are you upset about something? I stared at the screen in disbelief. Upset about something? As if we hadn't walked into a party we were never meant to be part of. As if my sons hadn't been completely ignored by their own grandparents. As if we hadn't walked out in silence because anything louder would have been too humiliating. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I spent the morning with my boys. We watched cartoons, played Uno, and I let them eat leftover cookies for lunch. I needed time to think, to figure out what I wanted to say, or if I wanted to say anything at all. But the universe didn't give me that choice. Around noon, Ryan called. That in itself was rare. He never called unless it was about something transactional, a question about Dad's meds, or asking if I could help Mom with her email again. I almost didn't answer. But then I thought, good. Let's hear it from the source. Hey, I said flatly. Dude, he said, like we were old buddies catching up. What happened last night? I blinked. You mean the part where no one saved us a chair? Or the part where we weren't even acknowledged? Oh, come on, he chuckled. It wasn't that bad. It was worse. He sighed like I was the difficult one. Hunter, you showed up late. Everyone was already in party mode. You told us to come at 8. Well, yeah, but people were already here by 6. You know how these things go. It's not like anyone was trying to snub you. Except for the part where you saw us and didn't say a word. He went quiet for a beat. Look, he said finally. Mom said you stormed out without saying goodbye. That's not cool, man. You kind of made a scene. I didn't make a scene, I said sharply. I quietly left so my kids wouldn't have to cry in front of your perfect little party. You think this is about favoritism again? He asked, a little edge in his voice now. Because you're always playing the victim. Just because you don't show up doesn't mean we're the bad guys. I laughed bitterly. I did show up. And that was the problem. He went on for a bit after that. The usual stuff. How I'm too sensitive. How I read too much into things. How he has a family too, and can't always babysit your feelings. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But I did text my mom later. I kept it short. Don't worry. You won't have to pretend to include us again. She replied with, I don't know what you want from me, Hunter. We did our best. You're always looking for something to be offended by. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to walk away this time. I was going to remember. Every slight. Every excuse. Every sugar-coated dismissal. And I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. Over the next week, the silence between us stretched long and awkward. No check-ins. No apologies. No how are the boys. Even my dad, who usually at least sends a gruff, Happy New Year text, said nothing. Then came the final straw. Max had drawn a picture at school, one of those my family art projects. Stick figures holding hands, everyone smiling. He gave it to me after dinner, proud as anything. I looked at it and smiled. That's awesome, buddy. Who's who? He pointed to the figures one by one. That's you. That's me. That's Caleb. And that's Grandpa. I frowned. Which Grandpa? Your grandpa, he said. The one who called. I paused. What about Grandma and the other grandpa? He shrugged. They're not in it. They didn't say hi. That hit me harder than any insult ever could. My sons weren't just being ignored. They were learning from it. Internalizing it. Figuring out who mattered and who didn't. And I wasn't going to let them grow up thinking that silence was love. That breadcrumbs were enough. That weekend, I took them to see Grandpa. My mom's dad, the one who left the voicemail, lives in a small assisted living complex about 45 minutes away. We brought him soup, puzzles, and the cookies he didn't get to try on New Year's. When he opened the door, his eyes went misty. He hugged the boys like they were made of gold. I'm sorry, he said again, over lunch. I should have said something sooner. You deserved better than this. And then he said something else. Something that changed everything. You know, he began slowly. Your grandmother kept this box. A file box, really. Had old photos, documents, that sort of thing. She used to say, one day, this will be Hunter's. She was the only one who saw how you got treated. My breath caught. She left it with me before she passed. I think she knew your mom wouldn't give it to you. Said you'd need it someday, when you were ready to remember who you are. I didn't know what to say. He disappeared into his closet and returned with a weathered, gray plastic box. Inside were photos of me as a kid, smiling, messy-haired, always holding a book or hugging my dog. Report cards. A copy of my college scholarship letter. Old birthday cards with her loopy handwriting. Receipts for checks she'd sent me during rough patches. marked with "Don't tell your mother." There was also a letter. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs, written in her careful cursive. "Hunter, I know they don't always see you, but I do. You've got the biggest heart in this family. You're not loud, but you're steady. Not flashy, but kind. That matters more than anything. One day, you'll build something beautiful, and I want you to remember, they don't get to decide who you are." I felt something break loose in my chest. It was the first time in years I cried. Not the angry, bitter kind of crying. The kind that lets grief out, quietly, so it stops drowning you. When I got home that night, I tucked the box under my bed and opened a notebook. I wrote down everything. Every moment. Every insult and cold shoulder. Every time they acted like I was invisible, like my kids were an afterthought. I didn't know why yet, but it felt like the beginning of something. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. But I wanted the truth. I wanted to see it all clearly, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the problem. And then, just a few days later, the final betrayal came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel on the surface, but it shattered what little trust one had left. I got a Facebook notification. Ryan had posted photos from the New Year's party. A full album. "Family time," was the caption. I clicked through, already bracing myself. There were pictures of everyone, mom and dad posing with Ryan's kids, my cousins clinking glasses, a cake with "Happy 2026" written in silver frosting. And then, buried toward the end, a group shot in front of the fireplace. Everyone standing in rows, arms around each other, smiling. Everyone except us. We weren't in a single photo, not even in the background. It was like we were never there. And when I scrolled to the comments, I saw it, the final blow. One of Mom's friends had written, "Looks like the whole family came together. Love seeing these happy traditions passed down." And my mom replied, "Yes, everyone made it. So much love in one room." I stared at that sentence for a long time. So much love. Except us. That's when the decision clicked into place. I was done. Not just with the events. Not just with showing up to be forgotten. I was done pretending I wasn't keeping score. Because if they wanted to erase me, they'd have to do it fast. I was finally ready to be seen. And I knew exactly where to start. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even message anyone in the family after I saw that Facebook post. I just closed the app, turned off my phone, and sat there in silence for a long, long time. It's funny how you can know something, really know it, for years, and still feel like you've been punched in the chest when the final proof lands in front of your face. I'd always known I was the afterthought, the shadow trailing behind Ryan's spotlight. But there was something different about seeing it broadcasted like that. As if my boys and I had literally been erased from a night we lived through. A night where my youngest tugged on his clip-on tie and whispered, "Do you think they're happy we came?" It broke something in me. That was rock bottom. Not because they hurt me. I was used to that. But because I finally realized I had let it happen. Again and again. I kept showing up to a rigged game expecting the rules to change just because I'd brought cookies and good intentions. I stopped sleeping well after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Max's confused face. Caleb standing there clutching the tin of cookies like a piece offering no one wanted. My mom's distracted glance. Ryan's indifferent nod. I saw it all over and over until it hardened into something else. Something sharper. Resolve. But first, I needed to get my house in order, starting with myself. I spent that January doing something I hadn't done in a long time. Putting myself first. Not in some dramatic, selfish way. Just consciously. Quietly. I took inventory of everything I'd let slide while trying to please people who didn't care. My finances were okay, but messy. So I made a spreadsheet. Every dollar I was spending on things that didn't add value, gone. I canceled the streaming subscriptions I never used, started meal prepping again, and rerouted the money into a savings account labeled stability. I revisited my freelance clients. Rebuilt my portfolio. I hadn't updated it in almost 2 years because I'd been too busy fixing my dad's laptop every other month or running errands for my mom under the guise of just being helpful. I stopped doing that. If they needed tech help, they could call Ryan. After all, he was the golden child. Surely he could handle a printer. The first week I said no to my mom. She asked me to swing by and help her hang curtains. Of all things, she paused for a long time on the phone. "Oh," she said finally. "Well, I just thought you'd want to be included." I nearly laughed. "I do. Just not like that." Then I hung up. Every no I said after that got easier. Every boundary I set tightened something loose inside me. Then came the idea. It started as a scribble in the back of my notebook, the same one I'd started using to log all the slights and cold shoulders. I was going through old entries when a thought landed hard and sudden. What if I turned this into something real? Not a revenge plot. Not yet. Just something mine. Something that didn't revolve around their acceptance. You see, I'd spent years freelancing in IT, fixing systems, building workflows, doing patch jobs for people who didn't understand the difference between a hard drive and a browser tab. And I'd gotten good at it, really good. I'd built networks for small law firms, upgraded medical systems for dental offices, even coded a few internal tools for startups that had no idea what they were doing. But I'd never built anything of my own. Until now. I started working nights. Once the boys went to bed, I'd sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and blueprint ideas. I didn't have funding. I didn't have investors. I just had knowledge and time. And resentment, which, I'll admit, can be one hell of a motivator. What I started building was a simple dashboard, a platform for small business owners to track and automate their IT maintenance in one place. Tickets, system updates, network status, license renewals, all of it visible, centralized, and streamlined. Something I wished every one of my former clients had when I started working with them. I called it Backbone, because that's what I'd always been for other people. The quiet support system, the thing they leaned on, ignored, then forgot about the second it was gone. But not anymore. The first prototype was rough. I launched a closed beta in March and got 5 users, all old clients I reached out to personally. A dentist, a tutoring company, a bakery with a weird obsession with Wi-Fi speeds. They loved it. One of them referred me to another, then another. By April, I had 27 users. By May, I was up to 60 and barely keeping up with support tickets. I hired someone, just part-time, to help me manage back-end issues. Her name was Julia, and she'd been laid off from a tech startup that collapsed during the New Year layoffs. We clicked instantly. She was sharp, efficient, and, like me, tired of being underestimated. That's when I started to feel it. Not success, not pride, but worth. Quiet, steady, grounding worth. The kind that doesn't ask permission or need applause. The kind that grows in the absence of noise. I stopped checking my family's Facebook posts. I muted my mom's number for a while. When she called, I let it ring. When she texted, "Miss you, sweetheart," I didn't reply. Because she didn't miss me. She missed the convenience of me. The version of me who stayed small, said yes, and didn't take up space. Around that time, Grandpa called again. "I heard you've been busy," he said, chuckling. "One of the nurses uses your program for her cousin's bookstore." I laughed. Word travels. "I'm proud of you, son." I didn't know what to say to that. I just swallowed the lump in my throat and said thank you. We started visiting him more often. Once a week, every Sunday. The boys would bring drawings, and I'd bring coffee and updates. He started telling stories, real ones. About the war, about my grandmother, about things he'd kept quiet for decades. And for the first time in my life, I started to feel like I came from someone. Like I wasn't just floating between the cracks of a family that had no space for me. Then June came. Max finished 2nd grade, and Caleb graduated from 5th. We did a small party, just the 3 of us, plus Grandpa and Julia. Balloons in the living room. Cupcakes. Streamers. Max wore a paper crown. Caleb made a speech. And for the first time, I didn't feel like we were missing something. I felt whole. Then the letter came. It wasn't from my mom. Or Ryan. It was from a lawyer. At first, I thought it was a scam. It looked official, stamped, sealed, addressed to my house. But I couldn't think of a single reason I'd be getting mail from a family attorney. Until I opened it. It was about my parents. Specifically, about their estate. Apparently, they were updating the family trust. Transferring certain assets. Preparing long-term documents in case something happened. The letter was a courtesy notice, letting me know that, effective immediately, I was no longer a named beneficiary. My name had been removed from the will. There was no note. No explanation. Just cold, clinical wording. You are hereby notified that your removal from the existing inheritance structure has been finalized, with full consensus from the trust holders. No action is required on your part. I stared at that letter for what felt like an hour. It wasn't about money. I didn't care about the vacation home or the family antiques or whatever else they were passing down. It was about erasure. About being written out, literally, from the family tree. My phone buzzed minutes later. A new text. It was from my mom. Please don't overreact to the lawyer stuff. It's just practical. Ryan has kids, after all. It doesn't mean we don't love you. I didn't reply. What could I even say? I wanted to scream. To rage. To drive over there and hold up that letter and ask her how she could look at my boys, her grandchildren, and decide they weren't worth a single cent or sentence in her legacy. But I didn't. Because that would mean I still wanted her approval. And I didn't. Not anymore. I wanted something else. Not revenge. Not yet. But justice. And the roots of it, the quiet, calculated setup, had already started growing beneath their feet. By the time July rolled around, I'd stopped expecting any of them to change. Not my mother. Not Ryan. Not my father, who hadn't spoken a single word to me since New Year's, unless you count his signature on the estate letter. And definitely not the rest of the family who stood silently behind them, acting like this was normal, like my erasure was just a private family matter, not worth bringing up. Fine. Let them have their delusion. Because while they were busy cutting me out, I'd been quietly building something much harder to undo. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building leverage. Backbone had grown past anything I'd expected. What started as a simple dashboard now had over 200 paying clients, and counting. Julia came on full-time in June. We added 2 developers, a customer support rep, and a bookkeeper who kept telling me I was sitting on a scale-ready product. We rebranded with a cleaner UI, launched our mobile beta, and began onboarding our first corporate pilot client, a local logistics firm with 5 offices across the state. Every win felt surreal. Every user I onboard, every invoice paid, every piece of positive feedback chipped away at the old insecurities my family had planted in me like weeds. But I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. I was doing it for my boys. Because one day, they'd grow up and ask what happened. Why their family treated them like ghosts. Why Grandpa Hunter never came to Thanksgiving. Why there were no photos of them in Grandma's living room. And when they asked, I wouldn't just have a story. I'd have proof of who we became when no one believed in us. Of what happens when you stop begging to be seen and start building something impossible to ignore. Still, part of me knew that wouldn't be enough. People like my mother didn't care about who you were. They only cared about what you had. Which is why I started planning the next step. It began innocently enough. At least, that's how I justified it. Julia and I were having lunch at a little cafe down the street from our new co-working space. She'd just wrapped up a demo call with a prospective client, and I was reviewing our churn rate from the previous quarter when she looked up from her sandwich and said, "Hey, didn't you say your brother's firm does something with asset management?" I blinked. "Yeah, Ryan works for a private wealth group." "What?" She turned her laptop around. "Because one of their regional subsidiaries just signed up for a demo of our enterprise tier." I leaned forward. Sure enough, there it was. The request came through our new landing page, filled out by an assistant named Jenna, and the company name? Whitestone Strategic Holdings. Ryan's firm. I felt a chill run down my spine. "They probably don't even know it's me," I muttered. Julia raised an eyebrow. "Should they?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen like it held the key to everything. And maybe, in a way, it did. Because this was my in. The family always treated me like a screw-up because I didn't have a real career. Because I didn't dress the part or talk about asset portfolios over wine. But now, their golden child was unknowingly courting my software for his firm. And suddenly, all the resentment I'd swallowed since New Year's began to simmer into something far more useful. Opportunity. I told Julia to proceed with the onboarding as if it were any other client. No special treatment. No acknowledgement of our personal connection. But behind the scenes, I began gathering every detail I could find. Ryan's firm wasn't just managing retirement accounts. They'd expanded aggressively over the last few years, acquiring smaller firms, offering estate planning services, and even brokering family trusts, including, as I discovered through public records, my parents' estate restructuring. The same estate I'd been quietly removed from. That night, I stayed up late researching. I combed through financial disclosures, public filings, press releases. I pulled up interviews Ryan had done for industry blogs, where he talked about preserving legacy wealth and keeping families together through smart planning. The irony was almost funny. Almost. Because here's the thing, financial firms, even big ones, are built on trust and discretion. And Ryan? He wasn't just an employee. He was a partner. His name was attached to several family trusts, including a few high-net-worth clients in our region, which meant if anything embarrassing ever happened, like, say, a messy, public family dispute, his reputation could take a hit. I wasn't planning to go nuclear. Not yet. But I wanted to make sure I had a full arsenal in place. So I called an old college friend, Evan, who'd gone into law. He owed me a favor from years back when I built him a custom CMS for his private practice. We met for coffee the next morning. I just want to understand my rights, I told him. I'm not looking to sue anyone. But if I was removed from a family trust, especially if I had reason to believe I was pressured out unfairly, what are my options? He leaned back in his chair. Depends. Were you a named beneficiary? I was. Then unless they can prove cause, like misconduct, fraud, estrangement, it gets tricky, especially if you were removed without being notified in full. Any documentation? I showed him the letter. His eyebrows rose. This is poorly written, he muttered. Sloppy. Almost like they rushed it. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. He scratched his chin. You wouldn't win much in court unless you proved undue influence or lack of mental capacity. But you could challenge the process. Force discovery. Bring light to their motivations. And if one of the trust advisors was related to the new beneficiary? He gave me a long look. Then you'd have leverage. That word again. Leverage. I didn't want their money, but I wanted them to squirm. I wanted them to know I could make it messy. That I chose not to. And that next time, I might not be so generous. After that meeting, I made a second call, this time to Grandpa. I hadn't told him about the letter yet. He deserved to know. He listened quietly, then said, They think they've buried you, Hunter. But they don't realize they planted a seed instead. I smiled. He wasn't wrong. The next few weeks were a blur of movement. Our enterprise client list doubled. I started speaking at local tech events. A friend of mine from LinkedIn offered to feature Backbone in a podcast interview about bootstrapped software companies. That episode, a 40-minute deep dive into my story, my kids, and the real reason I built Backbone, went mini-viral in our niche space. Guess who commented on the post? Ryan's boss. Small world. He wrote, Incredible story. Always good to see local innovation disrupting outdated systems. I pinned the comment. That same week, I got an email from Jenna, the assistant from Whitestone Strategic, asking if we could customize their dashboard with private label branding for client reporting. Of course, I replied. We're happy to accommodate partners, especially family-run firms. No smiley face. No signature flourish. Just a hint. A seed. Then I sent a copy of the podcast episode to my mother. No message. No preface. Just a link. She didn't reply. But 2 days later, I got a call. Blocked number. I answered. Hunter, her voice was small. Yeah. I saw the video. Okay. Long pause. You've been busy. I waited. You should have told us, she added. We didn't realize you were doing all that. That's the thing, Mom. You never asked. She didn't deny it. Just sighed. I don't want this tension between us, she said. I really don't. You removed me from the will. It wasn't personal. It was deliberate. Silence. Then, I just thought Ryan's kids. I cut her off. Ryan's kids already have everything. My kids had to bake their own cookies to get noticed. And even then, no one cared. Another pause. I want to make it right, she said finally. I nodded slowly. Good. Then do it. Because here's the thing. I wasn't asking for an apology anymore. I was demanding accountability. And the final act? That was already in motion. A date circled on the calendar. A gathering I'd been quietly organizing. And a truth they couldn't hide for much longer. Because I wasn't just coming back. I was coming back with receipts. The invitation went out 3 weeks before the event. It wasn't flashy. No gold trim or embossed lettering. Just a crisp, minimal email titled, Backbone, 1 year in. A thank you celebration. It went to clients, partners, mentors, friends, people who believed in me, people who didn't need to see a resume to treat me with respect. But it also went to a few, very specific others. My mom, my dad, Ryan, Aunt Lisa, who used to introduce me as the one who does computer stuff. Even Aaron, my cousin who couldn't be bothered to offer my boys a juice box on New Year's Eve. I didn't expect most of them to show. In fact, I figured they wouldn't. But I wanted the invitation on record. I wanted them to see it. Because for once, I wouldn't be the one left out. The venue was small but elegant. A rented rooftop space downtown with string lights, catered food, soft music. Nothing over the top, but miles ahead of the lukewarm lasagna and paper plates I remembered from family functions. Julia handled most of the logistics, because of course she did. She was now COO and the best hire I'd ever made. We had a slideshow set up in the back. Simple, looping visuals of our growth. Milestones, stats, screenshots of the dashboard from our first version to the polished one we now used across dozens of companies. Photos of the team, quotes from clients, a few press snippets. The podcast episode that had quietly racked up over 100,000 listens. It wasn't meant to brag. It was meant to document. The night started like most do, mingling, handshakes, quiet music, light clinking of glasses. Max and Caleb had their own little check-in table and wore matching suits. Max handed out name tags. Caleb manned the iPad for email signups and said, "Would you like to join the wait list?" Like he owned the place. People laughed. People smiled. People noticed them. Around 7:45, I was standing near the bar when Julia nodded toward the elevator. "They came," she murmured. I turned. Sure enough, there was my mother. Dressed up. Nervous smile. Clutching a handbag too tight. Behind her was my dad, stiff and quiet, like he'd been dragged there. Ryan walked in a few steps later, alone. He was on his phone, probably trying to look important. I approached. "Glad you made it," I said simply. My mom looked around. "It's nice." Ryan pocketed his phone. "Didn't expect such a crowd." "You weren't on the A list," I said flatly, then smiled. "But I figured you'd come for the food." He didn't laugh. We made small talk, the empty kind, all sugar and no substance. My dad asked how the business really made money. My mom said the place reminded her of my cousin's wedding venue. Ryan asked if we used any third-party security integrations. Classic finance talk for "How legit are you?" I gave short answers and longer silences. I didn't need them to be impressed. I needed them to watch. At 8:15, I took the mic. People gathered near the little raised platform at the far end of the room. I wasn't a natural speaker, but I didn't need to be. All I had to do was tell the truth. "Thank you all for being here," I started. Exactly 1 year ago, Backbone was just a sketch in my notebook, an idea born from frustration, late nights, and frankly, a lot of being underestimated. Light laughter. I scanned the room. My mom shifted slightly. Ryan looked bored. I built it because I was tired of feeling like a backup plan, like support staff in my own life. And then I realized, maybe that's what the world needed. A support system that doesn't collapse under pressure, that doesn't disappear when things get hard. More nods. Julia smiled at me from the front row. "So, tonight's not just a celebration. It's a reminder that being overlooked isn't a curse. Sometimes it's a cocoon." I paused. Then I clicked the remote in my hand, and the slideshow behind me changed. A photo appeared, grainy but clear. It was from New Year's Eve. Caleb standing near the door with the cookies. Max holding my hand. My mom in the background, laughing with Ryan. I let it sit there. A few people turned to look at her. My voice didn't change. Calm. Controlled. I wasn't always visible in the rooms that mattered. My kids weren't either. But that night, the night we were forgotten, something shifted. I stopped asking for a seat and started building the table. Click. The next photo was our first prototype dashboard. Then our first office. Then the podcast episode cover. Each one landed like a soft hammer. Click. A screenshot of our enterprise client list. With Whitestone Strategic Holdings at the top, Ryan's firm. He squinted. Click. An email chain between his assistant Jenna and Julia, discussing pricing and onboarding, complete with my polite closing line, "Happy to support family-run firms." I looked at him. "Still using the software, Ryan?" He blinked. "You knew?" "I built it." He went quiet. My mom looked at the floor. I clicked one last time. A photo of my sons. Dressed up, beaming, holding a sign that read, "We're not invisible." The room clapped. Not thunderous, but real. Then I stepped down. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the music turned softer, Ryan cornered me near the elevator. "You made your point," he said. "Did I?" He crossed his arms. "Look, you're doing well. I get it. But this whole dramatic reveal thing? Kind of petty." "Petty," I echoed. "Like being removed from a family trust without a conversation?" His jaw tensed. "That was Dad's decision." I tilted my head. "Sure. And you were just the silent partner. No one wanted to cut you out, Hunter. But let's be honest, you were always doing your own thing." "You mean living my life without faking perfection?" He didn't answer. I leaned in slightly. Here's the difference, Ryan. You built your life to impress. I built mine to last. I walked away before he could reply. Outside, my mom was waiting near the valet. She looked at me with wet eyes. I didn't know, she whispered. Not really. You didn't want to know. She flinched. What can I say, Hunter? That I'm sorry? That I was wrong. I shrugged. You can say whatever helps you sleep. She stepped closer. I see you now. I shook my head gently. No, Mom. You noticed me. There's a difference. She looked down. I didn't stay long after that. The boys were already asleep in the car. Julia had offered to drop off the equipment. The night was still warm, and the city lights flickered like quiet applause. I looked in the rearview mirror at my sons, then at the reflection of the building behind me, the one I had filled, the one I had built. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I had nothing left to prove, because they tried to write me out. But I wrote my own story, and this time, I kept the pen.